Welcome to today's webinar, the first in the series of the League of Women Voters collaboration with the American Society of Civil Engineers, Wisconsin section, offering a series of webinars on all the categories of infrastructure covered in the Wisconsin 2024 Infrastructure Report Card. Today, and at each of these webinars, ASCE Wisconsin section authors will speak on the chapters they've written, and we have invited speakers who are experts speaking on complementary topics. Today's webinar is on bridges and roads. The bio information for our speakers are on the Bridges and Roads flyer, which hopefully you've already read. We have had a joint steering committee meeting for months on this project, and the decision was to have these webinars over lunch and to keep the presentations to 1 hour. Speakers who've agreed to be here today will join us for Q&A, but engineers wanted the possibility of heading out to work after an hour. The program is being taped. Molly will send out the link to the program later, and it will also be on the web pages of both the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin and the American Society of Civil Engineers Wisconsin section. We'll put those web pages up at the end. And the reason for the links is so that we can contact our elected officials, sending them the link in case they did not have an opportunity to join us today. We ask that you keep your devices muted. Put your questions in chat as the presentations go along. Later, Molly will monitor chat and ask your questions during Q&A. Our first speaker today is Dorothy Skye, the president of the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin. We will then move to Carl Sutter, ASCE, who will explain the grading schedule and information about the report cards. And then we will have Tony Castle. So Dorothy, take it away.
Thanks, Carol, and thanks up front and all along the way to the American Society of Civil Engineers Wisconsin section for all of the efforts they put forth to doing this, the assessments required for this report card, but then explaining it to us non-engineers. So why is the League of Women Voters an enthusiastic member of this partnership with the ASCE? Well, we realize that we need to be able to assess legislation that we potentially advocate for, and we need to be able to talk to legislators using concrete details, if you'll pardon the pun, about infrastructure needs. And we all need reassurance that our road, rail, and airline transportation systems and speedy internet connections are reliably maintained and updated. When those pathways function well, they provide the means for us to prosper. We need reassurance that the water we use for all purposes is clean. We need to know that wastes from various sources are being disposed of properly. On top of all this, we must transform to a future powered by safe, reliable energy sources other than fossil fuels. That transition is necessary to combat climate change effects, but at the same time, we must take into account related costs and risks, all those practicalities. All this requires both engineering know-how and savvy political advocacy. Those requirements bring together the American Society of Civil Engineers Wisconsin section and the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin. As Marcia Gilbert Murphy, president of the American Society of Civil Engineers, has said, quote, "Infrastructure isn't a Republican or a Democratic issue. We all use the same roads, bridges, broadband, and water systems. Our role as civil engineers isn't partisan. It is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of all," end quote. And why the League of Women Voters? Well, the League's mission is to educate voters so they can advocate for good governmental policy, planning, and legislation. We recognize that attention to the nuts and bolts of physical infrastructure is necessary to support our democracy's future. This webinar series will educate us so that we can tell our elected officials that we support funding of well-functioning and well-maintained infrastructure. As Carol mentioned, there are 17 categories of infrastructure. They represent tangible assets that we rely on every day. Think of them: bridges, roads, aviation, transit, inland waterways, ports, dams, stormwater, drinking water, wastewater, broadband energy, hazardous waste, solid waste, railways, parks, and safe schools. So let's check out Wisconsin's 2024 Infrastructure Report Card. And Carl Sutter, a retired vice president of the Environment and Infrastructure Division of McMahon Associates, will you
This
please
short
share
presentation will
the basics of the report card and its grading system?
provide the grading criteria used for the 2024 Wisconsin Infrastructure Report Card. In the 2024 report card, 17 categories of infrastructure were assessed. The categories were aviation, bridges, broadband, dams, drinking water, energy, hazardous waste, inland waterways, ports, public parks, rail, roads, schools, solid waste, stormwater, transit, and wastewater. Each category is evaluated using the following grading criteria. Capacity. Does the infrastructure's capacity meet current and future demands? Condition. What is the infrastructure's existing and near future physical condition? Funding. What is the current level of funding from all levels of government and private industry for the infrastructure category as compared to the estimated funding need? Future need. What is the cost to improve the infrastructure? Will future funding prospects address the need? Operation and maintenance. What is the owner's ability to operate and maintain the infrastructure properly? Is the infrastructure in compliance with government regulations? Public safety. To what extent is the public safety jeopardized by the condition of the infrastructure, and what could be the consequences of failure? Resilience. What is the infrastructure system's capability to prevent or protect against significant multi-hazard threats and incidents? How able is it to quickly recover and reconstitute critical services with minimum consequences for public safety and health, the economy, and national security? Innovation. What new and innovative techniques, materials, technologies, and delivery methods are being implemented to improve the infrastructure? The grading scale is as follows. A, exceptional, fit for the future. The infrastructure in the system or network is generally in excellent condition, typically new or recently rehabilitated, and meets capacity needs for the future. A few elements show signs of general deterioration that require attention. Facilities meet modern standards for functionality and are resilient to withstand most disasters and severe weather events. B, good, adequate for now. The infrastructure in the system or network is in good to excellent condition. Some elements show signs of general deterioration that require attention. A few elements exhibit significant deficiencies. Safe and reliable with minimal capacity issues and minimal risk. C, mediocre, requires attention. The infrastructure in the system or network is in fair to good condition. It shows general signs of deterioration and requires attention. Some elements exhibit significant deficiencies in conditions and functionality with increasing vulnerability to risk. D, poor, at risk. The infrastructure is in poor to fair condition and mostly below standard, with many elements approaching the end of their service life. A large portion of the system exhibits significant deterioration. Condition and capacity are of significant concern with strong risk of failure. F, failing, critical, unfit for purpose. The infrastructure in the system is in unacceptable condition with widespread advanced signs of deterioration. Many of the components of the system exhibit signs of imminent failure. Now that you have an understanding of how the report card was created, let's examine today's categories.
Carol, it looks like you're muted.
Okay. Our first speaker today is Tony Castle. Tony, can you start your presentation at this point and give us a little information about yourself?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Carol. Yes, my name is Tony Castle. I am the chair and co-author of the ASCE Wisconsin Infrastructure Report Card Bridges chapter. We have my other co-author is my colleague, Josh Mitchell. Josh and I are both structural engineers at ENCS, a civil engineering firm headquartered in Milwaukee. I've got about 15 years of structural design experience, and Josh has about 12 as well. This is my second time as the chair of the Bridges chapter. I was also chair of the Bridges chapter in 2020. So with that, I guess we can jump into today's presentation on the Bridges chapter. As you can see on the slide, Wisconsin's bridges received a grade of C+. Thus, this means that our bridges are currently adequate for today's standard, but will require thoughtful planning to address future needs. This grade is the same as it was 4 years ago in the 2020 Wisconsin Infrastructure Report Card, and a tick higher than the National Report Card from 2021 Bridges chapter, which was a grade of a C. However, this isn't an indication that more improvement isn't needed. In fact, as you will learn throughout today's presentation, our state's bridges are in danger of deteriorating at an exponential rate and are in need of a long-term funding solution. When comparing the bridges in our state to other infrastructure categories, the C+ grade puts bridges in the middle of the pack. However, when you combine this grade with other transportation grades such as road, C, and transit D+, the traditional surface transportation chapters definitely rate near the bottom of the pack. This is an important factor to keep in mind, as typically transportation funding combines several of these categories. This slide also gives an outline of the criteria for each chapter that was investigated. Again, Carl gave kind of an extensive dive into that, so I'll kind of skip over all that criteria and we can jump right into the first two categories. As you can see on the slide, as of 2023, 6.5% of the 14,412 bridges in Wisconsin have at least one major structural component deemed in poor condition. The National Bridge Inventory Rating Scale defines poor condition as advanced corrosion, deterioration, cracking, chipping, or significant erosion occurring around the bridge. Wisconsin's 6.5% rate is slightly below the national rate of 6.8%. However, as the national rate has steadily decreased over the past decade, the Wisconsin rate has remained relatively constant, with a slight decrease in the second half of the last decade. The second statistic listed on the slide shows the 3.6% of Wisconsin's bridges have load posting restrictions. This means that they can only carry traffic up to a certain weight. While this rate is lower than the value reported in the 2020 report card of 5.3% and lower than the current national average of 11.3%, It is important to keep in mind posted bridges can dramatically increase driving time for larger and heavier vehicles serving as emergency responders, public transit providers, and freight haulers. Regardless, the reduction in posted bridges in Wisconsin over the past 4 years is a positive trend. As of the end of 2023, the average age of a bridge in Wisconsin was approximately 40 years old, which is slightly lower than the national average, just over 46 years. An important fact to keep in mind when considering this average bridge age is the majority of these bridges were designed for a lifespan of 50 years. So when these bridges were initially designed, the intent was for them to only last 50 years. For reference, today we design new bridges to have a lifespan of 75 years. So we have increased the life expectancy for new bridges, but we cannot assume that same life expectancy for the existing bridges. Another interesting tidbit to pull from the pie chart is that more than 1/3 of the bridges, 39% in Wisconsin, are 45 years or older. This is an increase from the 2020 Wisconsin Infrastructure Report Card, which reflected 31%. Therefore, a significant number of bridges are at or near the end of their design life and either currently need or will soon need major rehabilitation or replacement. Although aging infrastructure may not concern some, the key fact to keep in mind is that the deterioration can have a snowball or exponential effect. An older bridge that is currently operating satisfactorily, but can quickly deteriorate beyond repair. And it is hard to predict when and how fast this deterioration will occur. Next, let's switch gears and talk about bridge funding and future need. Wisconsin's bridge funding comes from 3 principal funding sources: the State Transportation Fund, bond proceeds, and federal funds. In addition, general purpose revenue from the state's general fund has been used to support transportation programs in recent biennia. Federal dollars make up 26% of Wisconsin's total transportation revenue, according to WisDOT's 2021 to 2023 biennial budget. Some 65% of the transportation revenue comes from state sources, which largely consist of motor fuel taxes, vehicle registration, title fees, and driver license fees. Approximately 3% of the total transportation revenue comes from the general fund, while the remainder comes from bonding and local funding. Comparing this current breakdown to the breakdown provided in the 2020 Wisconsin Infrastructure Report Card, the use of bonding has decreased, which is a good sign, while state funding has been significantly increased. Although this is a positive trend, more is needed to address the long-term funding crisis. The federal fuel tax on gasoline is currently 8.4 cents per gallon. It was last raised in 1993 and is not indexed for inflation. In practical terms, the lack of federal gas tax increase means that Federal Highway Administration is allotting funding for 2024 projects using 1993 funding levels. This greatly impacts the amount of total work that can be done using these dollars. Meanwhile, Wisconsin's gas tax is 30.9 cents per gallon. This amount was formally index adjusted annually based on inflation and fuel consumption. In 2005, the state legislature eliminated the annual indexing adjustment, so today the tax amount remains constant. Revenue from the motor fuel tax is a critical source of transportation funding, is likely to erode because of vehicles increasing fuel efficiency and the more prevalent use of electric vehicles. The average fuel efficiency of a U.S. passenger vehicles increased from 20 miles per gallon in 2010 to 24.5 miles per gallon in 2020. Average fuel efficiency is expected to increase another 31% by 2030 to 32 miles per gallon and increase 51% by 2040 to 37 miles per gallon. Again, the more fuel efficient our cars get, the less gallons of gas we purchase, and the less taxes collected to fund transportation-related projects. Now, it hasn't been all doom and gloom the past few years. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021, also called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law or the bill funding, provided a significant investment in Wisconsin's transportation system starting in 2022. The IIJA includes the single largest dedicated bridge investment since the construction of the interstate highway system. Based on formula funding alone, Wisconsin is expected to receive approximately $5.4 billion over 5 years in federal funding for highways and bridges. As of November 2022, $2.2 billion has been announced in Wisconsin for roads, bridges, roadway safety, and major projects. This includes $90 million in formula funding for bridges alone in 2022 and 2023. While there has been investment at the local, state, and federal levels in recent years, additional sustained transportation funding is needed to maintain and improve the state's transportation network and make sure it is fit for the future. Inflation in the cost of providing highway and bridge repairs is hindering the ability to increase funds to address the state's transportation needs. The Federal Highway Association National Highway Construction Cost Index, which measures labor and material costs, increased by 27% in 2022. So next, I'd like to touch on the topics of operations and maintenance. As discussed in the 2020 Wisconsin Report Card, the Wisconsin Bureau of Structures has developed an in-house software tool called the Wisconsin Structures Asset Management System, or WISAMS. WISAMS is a planning tool that analyzes current structure condition based on information collected from routine biennial bridge inspections, projects future bridge deterioration, and recommends structure work at appropriate time. Since the 2020 Wisconsin Report Card, BOS has continued to work on developing this tool and building a more robust bridge preservation and asset management program. In chapters 41 through 43 of the Wisconsin DOT Bridge Manual, the Bureau of Structures outlines program level goals, objectives, measures, strategies, policy, procedure, and workflow for the bridge preservation and maintenance action, often performed through the annual WISDOT Highway Maintenance Work Plan. With recent funding allocations, the Bureau of Structures is starting an effort to inventory and inspect all structures in the state with span lengths from 6 feet to 20 feet. Example of this would be a type of structure is a concrete box culvert with a distance between the inside faces of the vertical walls less than 20 feet wide. Bureau of Structures anticipates there are approximately 25,000 bridge-like structures in the state, and this is the first step in creating rehabilitation and replacement policies for these bridge-like structures. These 25,000 bridge-like structures are in addition to the 14,412 bridges currently inventoried. So a lot of bridges to be and bridge-like structures to be investigating and inventorying. Next, innovation and resiliency. Per Wisconsin's legislation, the design bid build project delivery method is the only method allowed for state-funded transportation projects. However, recent legislation allowed pilot programs to utilize the design build method. Unlike the design bid build process, the design build process allows for design and construction phases to overlap, reducing project delivery time. The design build method generally increases the design builder's risk and reduces the owner's risk, which would be the DOT. Over the past 3 years, Wisconsin has completed 3 design build pilot projects. 2 of them you can see pictures of on the slide. And WISDOT has identified 3 more potential design build projects, as well as the replacement of the Blatnick Bridge between Superior, Wisconsin and Duluth, Minnesota, which is a joint effort between the transportation departments of Wisconsin and Minnesota. Wisconsin DOT is still within its pilot programs for design build efforts and will continue to identify potential design build projects and refine this project delivery method. The Wisconsin DOT in 2019 applied for and received a grant through the FHWA's State Transportation Innovation Council incentive program and developed the standard bridge design tool. This pilot program has been through 2 phases and is now available for the intended replacement of small local bridges. The standard bridge design tool reduces the cost of design and construction of local bridges by delivering standardized plans for bridges that meet the criteria for the tool. With the tool, design timelines can be reduced to as little as 10 months. So then lastly, I'd like to touch on the recommendations to raise the grade. On average, the typical bridge in Wisconsin is at or near the end of its design life. Despite the recent historic federal and state funding efforts, there are still no long-term solutions to address the transportation funding needed to make substantial impacts to the aging bridges of Wisconsin. If the state and federal government continue to delay funding decisions, conditions will only worsen. Therefore, we recommend the following to raise the bridge grade. First, address short-term transportation funding needs by raising the state motor fuel tax and reinstating indexing to keep pace with inflation. Second, for long-term funding, continue to study and pilot mileage-based user fees. Third, continue to develop and utilize alternative project delivery methods to achieve cost savings and quicker repairs or replacements of bridges. And then finally, continue to utilize and improve the state's asset management system to increase bridge preservation efforts. So with that, that's kind of all I had today. I know if you have any questions about the bridge chapter, as Carol had mentioned, there'll be a Q&A session that you can bring it up then. But if we're unable to answer your question during that session, I've kind of put my contact information on here. You can feel free to reach out. Hopefully I've rambled on long enough that you're able to jot it down or screenshot it. But yeah, so I guess with that, that's all I had. So thank you for your time, and I'll send it back to Carol.
Tony, thank you. Good information. While Professor Habib is getting his slide deck up, I'll ask one question about, are there examples from other states where they have moved to a mileage-based charge?
Yeah, I think it's rather new from what I've seen. I think there is some states, I want to say in the Pacific Northwest, either Oregon or Washington, that have kind of used this. We've gotten varied responses by it from the public. I know a lot of people are concerned because whether, some of them have been like a device or something that you keep in your car, while other ones could be just, similar to like a tax, your taxes, you just kind of document what your mileage is. And, that in my opinion, that kind of encompasses more of the difference, that catches all, vehicles on there, whether it be hybrid, standard fuel cars or electric cars. So I think in most people's opinion, that's might be a more sustainable model to go off of as we get more fuel efficiency and electric use cars. So
Right. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Good information. And members of the audience, please put your questions in the chat. And we welcome Professor Habib Tabatabai, Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering from UW-Milwaukee. Habib, take it away.
Hey, thanks, Carol. My name is Habib Tabatabai. I'm a structural engineering professor and director of the structural engineering laboratory at UWM. I'm going to build a little bit more on discussion that Tony presented. And so as Tony indicated, there are about 6.5% of Wisconsin bridges that are rated as poor. That means one component could be the bridge deck, could be the substructure element, that means the piers and abutments under the structure, or other aspects that are rated as poor. And that's a standard NBI, what we call it, criteria for that. Now, this is, and he mentioned other statistics about the average age. The percent poor is widely used. It's a good indicator, but doesn't give you a full picture of what needs to be done or what's happening. So what does the data mean? That means that we need more work to do. There are challenges nationwide and also in Wisconsin addressing these aging bridge populations. And we need to develop a systematic, sustainable, and innovative long-term plan. And that comes from research, and I'll touch on some of the research that we are doing at UWM a little bit later. We need to address this, otherwise the scope and cost of the problem will continue to grow. It is not going to get better as the average age of bridges increase overall. So what are the things we can do? Although looking at percent poor bridges is a good metric, it may not be the most effective way to address a proportion, reduce the proportion of poor bridges. I'll use an analogy between human life expectancy and mortality rates. If you focus on mortality rates and try to address things, although important, but in a good aspect should be on focusing on extending life. And the same approach could be used on bridges. I think the most effective way to reduce the percent poor bridges over time is to extend the service life of all bridges. So in order to do that, we need to make the public and decision makers alike aware of the need for preventive and routine maintenance. It may seem odd to the public that a new bridge or relatively new bridge is receiving coatings and sealers, but that's actually the most effective dollar you can spend in preserving and extending the life of the bridges, and many people may not realize that. We need to focus on durable materials and construction methods. And the research comes into play in some of these as well. The option to look at life cycle cost as opposed to low bid minimum initial cost is an important thing to consider, because if you make the investment upfront and work for a more durable material, over long term, you'll get better life cycle cost expectancy. We need to make sustainability cornerstone of our design and long-term management of bridges. That's a buzzword that is really, truly important in terms of, especially with the challenges that we faced with the construction materials such as concrete for the future. We need to be able to have mechanisms to adopt relevant research results and have them guide directions, future directions and policies. And of course, perhaps most important, make the necessary investments to make all of these things happen. So in this last slide, I'm going to just mention a few things we do at UWM in terms of research to help with that process. We have just started in collaboration with Oregon State University and have created what we call Concrete Advancement Network. It's an industry university cooperative research center that is funded by the National Science Foundation and with industry input, heavy industry input and participation. We are, through this, we want to be at the forefront and develop things for the future of durable concrete. We're looking at durability, we're looking at long-term impact of concrete on the environment, the CO2 emissions. We look at using supplementary cementitious materials that to reduce the burden on in terms of CO2 emissions. We're looking at use of advanced materials, nanomaterials in improving the properties and developing more durable and sustainable material. In terms of specifically on durability of bridges, one of the key factors in influencing deterioration of bridges is the failing expansion joints. There are expansion joints on bridges to accommodate thermal movements and other movements of the bridge that are not visible to the eye. But those invariably fail over time and allow the icing salt and salt water penetrating underneath the bridge and causing long-term deterioration. So one of the projects that we just started with the Wisconsin Highway Research Program is looking at removal of at least part of those joints, accommodating the movements, but removing the expansion joints as a way of long-term durability of the bridges. Last thing I just want to touch on is we need to have good assessment tools for understanding reliability and service life of bridges. So we are working on models based on what we call survival analysis used in medical research to assess factors that contribute to extending the surface life of a bridge. If we understand those factors, we can intervene and affect those factors to increase the service life. With that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for this interesting presentation, Dr. Habib. I would now like to introduce Madison Anderson, who is the ASCE author of the Roads chapter. Madison, take it away.
Thanks, Carol. We'll get right into the roads chapter. So this is me. I am a transportation engineer. Well, first, my name is Madison Anderson. I'm a transportation engineer with Stanley Consultants based out of our Chicago office. Although I do live in Wisconsin in the Kenosha area, so I have plenty of experience with Wisconsin roads. And I was the author of the road section. So the overall grade of Wisconsin's roads in 2024 is a C, which is up 2 grades from 2020. So the grade, as kind of Carl mentioned, the grade was informed by 6 categories: capacity, condition, funding, future need, operation and maintenance, public safety, resilience, and innovation. And I'll jump in to some of the key findings in all of these categories. So Wisconsin roads are divided into several subsystems. The kind of definitions are listed on the screen, but the 6 main categories are backbone routes, connector routes, principal arterials, minor arterials, collectors, and local roads. So each serve varying roles from local travel to linking major economic centers. And some of the data that we used in the report distinguishes between the backbone routes and then non-backbone routes. So the non-backbone routes just refer to the state-owned routes that are not classified as backbone routes. So according to the pavement condition analysis conducted by the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, or WSDOT, using the pavement condition index, the PCI method, 99% of the state's 1,400 miles of the backbone highway system is rated fair or better. The system is composed of a variety of priority corridors and carries about 85% of the freight tonnage traversing Wisconsin's state trunk system or state highways. Even though the percentage of backbone pavements rated fair or better decreased slightly from 2023 to 2024, the backbone system has consistently exceeded target levels, as you can see from the top graphic. So the state's non-backbone system, which consists of the remaining state-owned system and carries over 50% of the state's highway traffic, exceeded the target levels of 80% of pavements rated fair or better. So in contrast, though, there was a TRIP report which estimates that nearly half of the major roads in the state were rated poor or mediocre using the International Roughness Index. So the discrepancy between WSDOT's data and the TRIP report's data largely arises due to just the differing methods used for measuring. So the International Roughness Index, or the IRI factor, measures a road's roughness or smoothness, whereas the PCI method reflects the overall condition of the pavement surface. So the TRIP report states that deficient roads cost Wisconsin drivers about $7.6 billion annually due to wear and tear on vehicles, also the wasted fuel due to congestion and the cost due to crashes. So increased levels of traffic congestion in Wisconsin affect commuters, businesses, shippers, and manufacturers. So it affects all of us. High congestion levels can also increase or cause prospective businesses to look to other states when considering expansion or relocation. And TRIP estimated that the value of lost time and wasted fuel in Wisconsin is approximately $1.9 billion a year. And the table shown on the slide details the number of hours lost annually for each driver in some of the state's largest urban areas, as well as a per driver cost of lost time and wasted fuel due to congestion. So moving along, according to WSDOT's mobility, accountability, preservation, safety, and service performance improvement report, that's a mouthful, also known as the MAPS performance improvement report, vehicle hours of delay totaled over 13 million hours and marked a 29% increase to the previous year. So these delay numbers were still 16% below what was recorded in 2019, indicating that the delay figures still remain favorable to what was recorded before the changes that stemmed from the COVID-19 pandemic. So congestion is expected to have an adverse effect on the $603 billion worth of commodities that are shipped annually using Wisconsin's highways. So now we'll jump into safety. So in 2022, 594 traffic fatalities occurred. And while Wisconsin's fatality rate is lower than the national average, rural areas are particularly hazardous, with double the fatality rate of the national average on rural roads. So in 2022 alone, the costs resulting from traffic crashes in which roadway features were likely a contributing factor totaled $2.6 billion. So the table on the slide shows the average fatalities and cost per driver between 2017 and 2021 for various cities throughout the state. And poor road conditions often lead to more severe accidents, which can ultimately increase the costs associated with crashes, which include medical bills, legal fees, and vehicle repairs. So improvements in road design, such as bettering lane markings as well as lighting, just two examples, can definitely help reduce these costs and help save lives. So WSDOT, moving on to operation and maintenance, WSDOT contracts with all 72 county highway departments to perform much of the maintenance of the state highway system. Innovations in winter maintenance, such as using salt brine, has helped reduce the environmental impacts of winter maintenance, as well as some of the costs associated with winter maintenance. And they've been utilized more frequently and have largely been successful. And then in the 2023 to 2025 budget, a total of $222.3 million, broken up into $206.5 million in state funds and $15.8 million in federal funds, were earmarked for the state highway maintenance and traffic operations programs, which mark a 10.26 increase from the previous budget. And what Tony mentioned, and kind of a theme that you've heard throughout, is that maintaining the pavements is definitely kind of better. So there's a Cornell Local Roads program reported that maintaining pavements, found that maintaining pavements, every $1 of deferred maintenance on roads and bridges, and cost an additional $4 to $5 in needed repairs in the future. So there's definitely an economic benefit of proactive maintenance and investment into our road system. So Wisconsin has implemented several innovative strategies to maximize revenue and improve resilience. So the Division of Transportation System Development has led the way, fostering innovative ideas in areas like construction management, design, and asset management. So some of the key innovations include the use of iPads for construction and bridge inspections, the move to a paperless environment, as well as the expanded use of InfraWorks, which is a software that is largely used for project planning. So another innovation is the implementation of dynamic part-time shoulder views, which adds capacity to the road only when it is needed, which helps avoid the cost of widening a roadway. So WSDOT has also adopted uniform material selection policies, such as consistent pavement markings, which enhance safety and optimize maintenance costs. So additional innovations include right time treatment, balancing preservation and expansion efforts, as well as value engineering, on-site material reuse, and performance-based maintenance, all of which really aim at stretching the dollar further. So WSDOT has also improved roadway resilience through traffic incident management, or TIM, which is a collaborative process that allows public safety and transportation agencies to respond to and clear traffic incidents quickly and safely. So effective TIM reduces delays and minimizes incidents and those impacts, and improves the safety of motorists, crash victims, and first responders. So funding is definitely a persistent issue. While there has been a significant increase in funds due to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, inflation has eroded much of the benefit from that increase in funds. So Wisconsin's motor fuel tax, which has been unchanged for over 15 years, has been insufficient to meet the growing needs of the state's roads, especially as Tony mentioned, fuel efficiency and electric vehicles reduce fuel tax revenues. So there is a critical need for long-term sustainable funding solutions to maintain and enhance our roads. So WSDOT is addressing the challenge associated with maintaining and enhancing Wisconsin's transportation infrastructure amidst inflation and evolving transportation needs with various strategies, one of which is Connect 2050, which is a long-term multimodal transportation plan with various goals and objectives to guide the development of the statewide transportation system through 2050. So even though there are goals and strategies outlined in Connect 2050, which can help guide the development of Wisconsin's multimodal transportation system, statutory reports like Connect 2050 typically do not influence how a transportation system is managed or funded. So moving on how to raise the grade, Wisconsin's roads grades, we could do several things, kind of broken down into invest, improve, enhance, develop, and balance. So we can invest in sustainable funding mechanisms that offset the loss of fuel tax revenues from electrification and increased fuel efficiency, as well as improve safety and reduce congestion by updating traffic operations and addressing geometric design flaws, as well as we can enhance non-state roads by integrating traffic calming measures, as well as pedestrian and cycling infrastructure. And then we can also develop a multimodal transportation system in urban areas to help reduce congestion and promote alternative transportation methods. And then last but not least is balancing the maintenance, rehabilitation, and reconstruction to extend pavement life cycles in a cost-effective manner. So I thank you. And in conclusion, I think Wisconsin roads are improving, but challenges do remain. Addressing issues such as funding, safety, congestion, and maintenance is essential for sustaining this progress. And by taking a forward-thinking approach and leveraging available funding, we can create a more resilient, safe, and efficient transportation network that supports the state's economy and its people. So with that, I will pass it on back to Carol.
Madison, thank you for the informative presentation you just gave. Our last speaker is on a different topic. Debbie Jackson, take it away.
Guys, it's great to be here, and I want to thank the League of Women Voters and ASCE for partnering up to cover this important topic. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Transportation Development Association, we are a statewide multimodal transportation advocacy group. Our members include users of the system, let's say businesses, agricultural entities, and then providers of transportation services, which certainly is local governments, contractors, engineers, unions, and so kind of it's a very broad tent. And what we focus on is ensuring that Wisconsin has sustainable transportation investment to develop and maintain a safe, modern, interconnected transportation system. And so we are a unique group. Every state does not have a group like TDA, but there are groups around the country that are similar. And we exchange information. So we follow what other states are doing. We do work at the state level and also at the national level. So we were founded in 1971. So we've been at this a long time. I personally, as the Executive Director of Transportation Development Association, have been with the organization 22 years. And I've been in the leadership role for the last 5. So this is a passion for me. So at its core, I mean, transportation is essential to our economy. I think we all realize that. But they're also essential to safety and to the well-being of our residents and to resilience. I just finished an active transportation event here in Milwaukee talking about public transportation, bike and pedestrian facilities. So it is important, although we're talking about roads and bridges today, to understand that we are talking about a system, and the integration of the various components is an important feature. And as the people who presented this morning know, good transportation doesn't just happen. It takes years of planning, of investment, and maintenance is certainly key. And that the decisions that we make today have a long impact. If we see conditions decline, it will take years for us to get back on track. So it is important that we build on success. There was a reference to some increased funding, and that is true. I would like to clarify just a couple things. We have seen increase in state and federal funding. The bill funding brought in some significant new revenue. And I saw that Tony referenced $5.4 billion in federal aid highway funds. The only thing I would ask to add to that is that we were already getting about a little over $4 billion. So the increase in funding was about $1 billion over 5 years in that pool of funds. And then in the last budget, we had some significant infusion of general fund revenue. So when you're looking at our funding and you say, hey, we had an increase of state funding, a lot of that was driven by one-time monies from the general fund. So I think the group is correct when they point out we have some fixed flat fees, the user fee and the gas and the registration, or the vehicle registration fee and the gas tax. And when I say they're fixed and flat, I mean they require a vote of the legislature to increase. And what you pay and what the state collects has nothing to do with the price of the gallon of gas or the price of the vehicle. And so the fund has to deal with the increased costs, which have been at historical levels. And when we're looking at construction inflation, they're usually a multiple of CPI. So we had very high consumer inflation that we were dealing with. On the construction side, they were dealing with multiples of that. But the transportation fund with our user fees really is not set up to deal with those. And what has happened in recent years, because these funds are not growing with the economy, like other percentage-based taxes, let's say a sales tax, we are increasingly relying on general funds to make the transportation fund whole. That is not necessarily a bad thing, but I would say it potentially puts transportation at risk. There are benefits to our transportation fees that go the gas tax and the vehicle registration fee because they are constitutionally protected. As long as we're collecting them, the state constitution now says that they have to be used on transportation. When we rely on general fund revenue for the transportation fund, with an economic downturn, those general funds could always be redirected. So that is something that we have to be aware of. When we're looking at Wisconsin transportation and the challenges we face, I would say Wisconsin is not alone. States across the nation are looking at this issue. The federal government faces the same issue. Again, Tony pointed out the gas tax at the federal level hasn't been increased since 1993, which means that the bipartisan infrastructure law was significantly about deficit spending. And so as states are wrangling with what comes after the gas tax, I don't think anybody has cracked that nut. There are states that have, I would say, are doing pilots on vehicle mile traveled programs. Some are further along than others. I think Virginia might be the furthest along as doing VMT really kind of as an alternative to a electric vehicle registration surcharge. But there's no state that is collecting anywhere close to enough revenue to replace the gas tax. So I think that we are all investigating how to do that. I think you'll see a significant push here in the state in the next no, 3 to 4 years to really make the case to the legislature about what the alternatives are and the need to invest in kind of what comes after the gas tax. So I would, at this point, say, hey, you know, the ASCE report card is so important. It gives us a familiar vehicle to track our progress and to keep, you know, pressure on legislators to, you know, keep the momentum rolling. We have made some progress, but it would be easy to lose momentum. It would be easy to fall back and have our conditions begin to deteriorate again. And so what I would say, you know, we've been holding roundtables around the state. We did 2 last week. We're going to do 2 more at the end of October. We have elected officials there. And when they're talking to us about transportation, I would say, generally speaking, they're all in favor of transportation. The harder part comes down to when we talk about how we're actually going to fund what the transportation. But they also say, hey, guys, if you want to move the transportation issue, we need to hear from you. So we're in an election season, but I think it's important to point out that it's always a good time to talk to your elected person at the state, the local, or the federal level about the importance of transportation and the need to fund the system on which we all rely every day. And with that, I just want to thank you again for all the work that you do.
Thank you so much, Debbie Jackson. And to all of the speakers for the way these presentations reinforced each other. I want to comment early that the links to this program will be available, and Molly will send out the link. And we urge you to contact your elected officials making an appeal for dealing with the whole funding issue that was so pervasive throughout today's program. And Molly, you are now up. I have seen interesting questions going into the chat.
Yep. Thanks everyone, and thanks for all of the great questions in the chat. I'm just going to read them in the order that they were written. So first up, I think this one is for Tony. Your first 2 recommendations to increase funding will be unpopular with the public. How do we overcome this issue?
Yeah, that's in my opinion, that's the $1 million question, right? How do we get people to support this? I think you know that there were some good other points brought up in other presentations in terms of I think Madison, you had the cost of wasted fuel sitting in congestion or just maintenance to your car was you know, is varying from city to city. But I do recall when I had done national level infrastructure legislation day, I recall like the number of $3 to $4 per day per driver, and so that's the cost that the failing infrastructure is costing the driver. Now, I think there was another one that was basically you know, the fuel increase or whatever is $2 or something, like I want to say it was about $2 per person. So or per driver. So now you just got to kind of convince, you know, show the logic to the public, you know, where it costs you $4, or would you rather invest $2 to try and mitigate that $4? So I think a lot of people have a lot of different opinions. I think mine is that we just have to continue to educate the public educate our legislators to make it a priority. You know, I think when most people get explained these costs that Madison and the others had mentioned, you know, it's kind of, in my opinion, a no-brainer as to why we'd want to increase funding to save just even the average driver money. So again, I think it's just grassroots efforts, education, and reaching out to legislators to make it a priority. So it's hard to do. I know, obviously we used to have indexing for the gas fuel tax. That got changed in 2005. That was quite a few years ago now, but I think some of that, in my opinion, was maybe there just wasn't enough good publicity. I think we've done better job recently. I think one of the efforts that we had recently was making money that's basically set aside with the fuel tax, that gets spent on transportation projects. And so I think when that effort went out a few, 5 to 10 years ago, there was really good publicity with that. So I think just continuing to get the word out and educating the public.
Great, thank you. This next question is for Habib. Are bridge designs and materials still evolving, or are they pretty well matured?
Oh no, there is no stagnant thing. There is continuous improvement, even the same materials. So you have Portland cement, for example. The Portland cement of today is very much different from what it was in the 1970s and 80s and so on. This works for, in terms of improvements, but also creates complicating factors that we have to consider. Today's cement, for example, are a lot finer particles, generate more heat. Heat can create temperature differentials that can cause problems. So the process continues the same with construction methods as well.
Great, thank you. And we have looks like we might have 2 more questions for you in a row. Are there things a layperson can look for when walking or driving over a bridge to assess its structural stability?
Well, of course, if you see a big piece of the structure dangling, then that's, but a lot of what you may see, for example, if you are stopped on a bridge and you see in one lane going one direction and the other direction traffic, you see movement, and that is not something to be concerned about. You perceive that because you're in a car, and actually as somebody who has hung on the bridges for a long time, you see a lot of movement because of that. That's nothing to be concerned about. Anything that is a common sense observation of problems, perhaps something to notify somebody about. But other than that, it's the observations are more nuanced and has to have more training to determine whether something is significant or not.
I'll add on to that too, Professor Tabatabai. I know, obviously, if you see a bridge and there's a load restrictions or something, like some sort of signage that says "Don't go on this bridge," that's usually a good sign. But we do have every bridge. As I said, there's 14,000 in the state that are inventoried. So every 2 years at least, the bridges get looked at and inspected by somebody who's trained to kind of look for certain things. Now, they don't always catch everything, obviously, but I think in my opinion, kind of, usually the experts take a look at it and they'll kind of alert the proper people if there's any concerns. But
by the way, the federal is by federal law at least every 2 years. So there's some bridges based on the need they inspect more frequently than that. But since 1970s, I think that has been the federal law to inspect those bridges.
Great, thank you. Another question, is consideration being made of the heavy CO2 cost of concrete production as a strong influence on climate change?
Yes, that is a big challenge, and one of the reasons our Concrete Advancement Network was initiated is to address that. And the industry is doing, and researchers are doing a lot to address that. So you do have anywhere, depending on who quotes it, 7 to 10% of the CO2 emission attributed to the Portland cement production. So that is something that is an important consideration. That's why what we need to do as we work on durability aspects and strength aspects, we also address that. And a lot of good work has been done in that one. If you are familiar with cement, you cannot find a typical Home Depot or Menards the regular type 1 Portland cement anymore. It's a type 1L, we call it. It's a limestone cement that is up to 15% of cement replaced with limestone. We're trying to reduce the usage of Portland cement. We also have supplementary cementitious materials, pozzolanic materials, from waste materials from industry that we're doing a lot of research on assessing those as adding additive to not only reduce the use of Portland cement, but improve its properties. And that's the beauty of some of these supplementary cementitious materials, not only help in one way, but they're beneficial in other aspects as well.
Great, thank you so much. This next question is not directed to anyone in particular, so I'll just open it up for all of our speakers. So whoever wants to tackle this one. Do we need an annual EV tax dedicated to road and bridge maintenance?
We have one. We have a EV surcharge, which was established a couple bienniums ago, and it was increased by $100 in the last biennium. So if you're an EV owner, you pay $175 more on for your registration fee than everybody else. And it does go directly to the transportation fund, and it is constitutionally protected.
Thank you. This next question, I think this is for you, Habib. For bridges, there's a description of them being either functionally obsolete or structurally deficient. Can you define these terms and comment on the importance of these items?
Yes, so yeah, functionally obsolete is completely different than structurally deficient. And there's sometimes confusions about that. But functionally obsolete, I'll give you an example. It essentially means that it does not meet today's standards, especially for geometric consideration. So if you are driving on a nice road with wide shoulders and you approach a bridge and suddenly the shoulders disappear and you are entering a bridge with very little to no shoulders, and there is potential for impacting guardrails on the side, that's functionally obsolete. That does not meet today's requirements for design. But if you are going on that bridge and the bridge deck is corroded, pieces are falling off, and those are then they get rating, which is a rating number between 0 and 9. If it falls at 4, which is poor condition, or now they call it poor condition, we used to call structurally deficient, and then that is something that we would need to repair. But the structurally deficient mainly addresses geometric. If you don't have clearance, if your bridge is called a can opener because the big trucks going over, their tops blow off, hit the bridge, then that's also a functionally obsolete structure.
I'll add on to that too. I know funding used to be based off of those terms, structurally deficient, functionally obsolete. In recent years, even in the 2020 report card, we talked about structurally deficient. But since the turn of the 2020s, The federals have gotten away from those terms and tried, as you said, poor is kind of replacing the structurally deficient. And I think it's just more of trying to give more flexibility to funding and getting funding for bridges that, you know, maybe they're not structurally deficient or functionally obsolete, but definitely need some sort of maintenance or intervention with funding. And so those terms are kind of going to the wayside, but they used to be a lot more tied into funding reasonings or applications.
Great, thank you to you both. This next question is for Madison. What is the practicality and comparative cost of recycling/reusing road surface materials versus disposing of them and using brand new materials like asphalt and concrete?
So there's not a great one size fits all answer to when we should kind of reuse some of the materials that are on the project or on the site or get new ones. There are definitely trade-offs for both. I would say there for alternatives for like asphalt, there's warm mix asphalt, there's recycled, but you have to look at some of the trade-offs. Are there environmental trade-offs? Are there economic trade-offs, as well as durability and life? And generally, I would say those considerations are done pretty upfront on a lot of projects. There is kind of a tool called the life cycle cost assessment, life cycle cost analysis, which is required on certain projects with WSDOT. Not all of them, but it's hard to have one good answer for the various different types of projects, because sometimes you might need to fully reconstruct a road, and it might be more beneficial to use concrete than it would be to use asphalt. Or there are also instances where the base is concrete, and then in subsequent years for maintenance, it is overlaid with asphalt. So a lot of those considerations are done up front and can vary, I would say.
Thank you. Another one, have there been any innovations that delay or prevent pothole formation?
It depends. I would say I wish I had a solid answer. Sometimes potholes just develop, and you could do everything in your power to really try to reduce the formation, but even with all the preventative maintenance, they can still occur. So some potholes, it depends on kind of the mechanism or how that pothole developed. Sometimes it's water getting in, freezing, expanding, and popping out the concrete. Other times there might be failure in the subbase of the pavement structure. So depending on the various kind of distress types that are seen in the pavement, there are various mechanisms that can be used to help prevent some potholing, but it's identifying those, the right timing of it, of the maintenance. So there are strategies out there, but it's kind of hard to have a one size fits all answer, I would say, and that's pretty consistent, I would say, with or just a common thing with pavement in and of itself. I wish there was just kind of a one solid answer, but it largely kind of depends on the environment and the location, the project, the history of the pavement, different things like that.
Thank you. We have another roads question. Are there sensors under the surface of high traffic roads to regulate lights at interchanges and keep traffic flowing, or are there other strategies to minimize idling within traffic jams?
So there's, I would say, kind of three categories, kind of off the top of my head. There are definitely some roads that have wires or sensors or magnets within the pavement structure that can detect when a vehicle is approaching the signal. There are also intersections that have little cameras or various detection devices that might not be in the pavement structure itself, but can see or process when a vehicle is approaching and turn kind of the signal a different or change, go through the cycle. And then there are instances where there aren't those technologies in place. Some of the ones that kind of come to mind are maybe like roundabouts don't really have any of those sensors that at least that I'm aware of, or various stop signs. So it kind of depends on the intersection. I know that a lot of the major roads do have sensors, and it can gather a lot of different information, not only kind of when a vehicle crosses, but also how many vehicles cross that intersection or use that road during what time of day, which really kind of is a element of data that is used then for traffic counts that plays into kind of road capacity and different elements in design. So it kind of depends on the road, but there are definitely those technologies in place at certain intersections.
Okay, thank you. I can open this question up for the group. Has there been consideration of enhancing rail transportation to take pressure and wear and tear off of roads?
So I'm not entirely sure about the rail, just because I'm not as involved on that side. I'm more of the roads person. But I know that it is a concern. The weight of vehicles is definitely a concern. As vehicles are heavier, the kind of think of it as you just like pushing on like a foam mattress or something. The harder you push, the farther it goes down. Whereas maybe like the lighter you push, it doesn't go, the mattress doesn't go nearly as far down. And that's kind of with the same thing with the distresses or the weight. So with heavier vehicles, some of the damage can go farther down into the pavement structure, which could cause damage kind of at that lower level of the pavement system. So I think there's definitely is concern with heavier vehicles driving on roads, but there are sometimes it's unavoidable. There are oversized, overweight vehicles and restrictions. Just certain machinery needs to be moved across the state. There are kind of processes and permits that need to be applied for to be able to move kind of such heavy equipment on roads using oversized and overweight vehicles.
I would just jump in to add one thing for clarification. Rail is a different type of infrastructure. It is privately owned by the railroads, and it is operated primarily, or most of it in Wisconsin is. Wisconsin, the state, does own some of the tracks, but predominantly in the nation, it is privately owned. So it is not like the state can create the rail lines, and we have to basically show an operator that running those rail routes is profitable for them. So it is a little bit more challenging for us to direct that because we don't own it. It is private companies.
Thank you. It looks like we have time for maybe one more question. So I'll open this one up to the group again. This is a bridge question. What engineering techniques and strategies for bridges have improved recently in Wisconsin to meet the needs for resiliency against natural disasters increasing due to climate change?
Good question. I think so obviously in Wisconsin, we don't see many hurricanes up here, but what we do see for climate control impact is increased rain, flooding, and kind of that sort. And so I know for bridges, the hydraulics, or basically how water flows in and through and around the bridge, a lot of the regulations and design efforts are rather older, like the methodologies are definitely decades kind of established decades ago. And so, there is definitely a need for, as we get higher rain totals and that sort, to kind of update that reference. I know recently the Bureau of Structures has provided some more in-depth analysis of rain or of water as it's moving around and through the bridge. I think we'll continue as we keep continuing to get more data, trying to incorporate that into new designs, existing designs, and there's definitely I've noticed at least some increase in importance to potential scour or erosion, which scour is basically the soil around a bridge getting washed away in high rain events. So that would, in my opinion, that would probably be the biggest impact that we have to bridges. I know there's also, obviously, with the Professor Tabatabai mentioned that we have expansion joints in bridges as the temperature range kind of increases. Our bridges tend, if there's a big increase in a day or a couple of days, there can be movement of the bridges, and so those big swings, you'll see a lot more movement. So as we try to improve those expansion joints, that's kind of another way that we're trying to combat that. But
thank you very much, Tony. And thank you to all of our speakers who laid out very good information today that we can use to write our elected officials. There are no shortage of important funding issues to address. So again, let your public officials know of your support for them to address the issues that concern you from listening to this session today. I thank all of our speakers. I thank the League of Women Voters and the people behind the scenes. Molly was here today. All of you were familiar with Anastasia. I appreciate all of the work of the authors in writing these chapters. It has been a lot of time over many months. And I appreciate the support of the whole organization, both the League of Women Voters and the American Society of Civil Engineers. Thank your families for sharing you with us. Express our appreciation to your employers. It has taken all of these contributions to make today so successful. And I thank the audience for being here today. And I urge you to put on your calendar 2 weeks from today, aviation and transit, 2 very different topics, different speakers, but same time, same place. So thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.